How are students able to get access to the recordings?
You can report it, you can post it, you can share it. I don't see it being recorded though.
If you've already recorded, it is recorded. Senator Rubio.
Oh, I just want to say something. I think it might be like illogical to demand so much out of one person, like specific minutes and every word that is said during the meeting. That's like, I don't think that's really like possible for somebody to do. So I was like, I would say like, we should not be like that harsh on the, yeah.
Senator Azim's proxy.
Hi, my name's Ian. I'd like to make one note about the whole notion to ban certain companies. So that I think this is really a time where we have to ask ourselves, do we stand for something? And sure, we could be blacklisted from a job. We could not get something, but if we live in fear of that, then we're not gonna do anything. That's worse than.
Right, and then, yeah.
Just point of inquiry, our names weren't put for our decisions, like on
No,
that, okay,
it's just a number.
yeah.
Except it was unanimous, so all the people present at that meeting will be on public record.
Senator Coben?
Should we move on?
Yes, yes. All right, next, we're gonna
Wait.
move on to student.
I'm sorry, it's just something about the minutes, though, like it's in the Constitution and the bylaws that the minutes shall be defined as a record of all happenings during a meeting.
Understandable, but we also have one person taking notes,
Okay, but that's their job, so.
and they're doing the best that they can. Thank you. So we're gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is student concerns and complaints. Does anyone want to speak to this agenda item? Senator Patel.
So, I'm gonna reiterate this in the, what do you call it? The senator updates, but like sustainability committee, we had 45 people sign up for the competition, the Drew in the dark light competition, so that's a compliment.
So good, yeah. Right. Does anybody have a student concern or complaint? Any students have a concern or complaint today? Senator Franza?
There were reports that in Baldwin, the dryers were burning and eating up the clothing. I believe facilities has since addressed that, but I think because so many people experience damages for their clothing, they're either seeking compensation or for facilities to make sure that's not happening again in other dorms.
Senator Azim's proxy?
Thank you. One of the largest concerns to a lot of people in the Drew community is the lack of paper towels in the majority of the dorm bathrooms. That is disgusting. It's spreading disease, it's causing people to become sicker. And come on, really, like, we can afford paper towels. This is absurd. Put them back in. I don't care about the hand towels they give out to people. Do that.
Senator Franklin?
Point of information on that, I'm pretty sure it wasn't about the expense, like that was the sort of reasoning given, but also it was because a lot of people were flushing them down the toilet, which was causing issues to the drainage. So I'm not saying that anybody here would flush paper towels down the toilet, but I'm just saying that that's what I've heard, and it caused like a lot of damage.
Senator Azim's proxy, you'd like to speak?
Okay, but bear with me here. You're still spreading disease. So maybe we should just, I don't know, educate people on it or provide more hand towels, but like, that's still really disgusting. Like, we can have some paper towels. It's not too much to ask from a private liberal arts college that some people pay over $50,000 a year. I mean, come on. Not asking.
I believe the facilities liaison would be able to take that on their next meeting. Am I correct? Senator Blanco?
Yeah, I'm taking notes, don't worry.
All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, which are the action items. It's 8:12. Senator Tobin, you have a resolution on the floor. Would you like to speak?
Yep. Okay, so this is for gas budget. A lot of where student government representatives use motor vehicles to pick up and transport materials for sponsored events, whereas gas expenditure places an undue financial burden on already strained college students. Whereas to incentivize further student government representative engagement in using their own motor vehicles to aid in event material transport, be it resolved that the Drew University College of Liberal Arts student government shall allocate $200 toward reimbursing eligible past and future gas costs for the 2023 to 2024 school year. A lot of people use their own cars, me included, and I think, we could be reimbursed for gas. I I heard from other senators that this is something that they would want.
Senator Franklin?
Point of inquiry, are you generally going to have like an estimation of the amount of gas that you used? Or like fill it up at the end and like, just like, what's your sort of plan for like how to measure that?
Mileage and the miles per gallon, I've been recording it at least for me, so I have. Yes.
Senator Zines Foxy?
I think it's a great idea, and I second.
Right, does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Senator Carranza?
I would just like some clarification on how we can determine kind of like you were saying, is it mileage? Do we have receipts where we can say who picked what up? I think it's a great idea. I think we definitely just need a way to determine how much somebody gets and to make sure that obviously no one can take advantage of this issue.
Senator Coven?
You just do the amount of miles driven and then take the miles per gallon, calculate that.
Oh, okay.
Senator Frazier?
Isn't there like a federal mileage rate that you get? Yes. And that's how the school reimburses students already for different things, so.
Senator Nazim and then Senator Wright?
I think Senator Fraser should take into consideration that the federal mileage is an average, and that we should also be concerned with people who drive gas guzzling SUVs. They also need to be reimbursed, and I don't want them to lose their money. They are still, some cases, they could be poor too, so we should also look out for them.
Thank you.
Just wanted to do a point of information. Clubs aren't getting reimbursed for any money that they spend in their own means, so I don't know if the school would take it on itself, but I know in terms of clubs, if you spend your personal money for the club that in which you represent, you will not be reimbursed as of the beginning of the spring semester. So this will be coming specifically from student government.
So the funds that we would be using for this resolution, correct or incorrect, would be from the student government. Is there a motion on the table to pass this resolution? Senator?
I have another just quick point.
Yeah, go ahead.
So does that include like a budget change now? Is that like sort of what you're envisioning with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Senator Zines Foxy?
I'd like to introduce a motion to vote on this.
One second, Senator Patel.
I just thought of this idea, we should like do a spreadsheet or something, like a Google sheet of like, I don't know, of this information too. So just. that's my-
Also, it could start now.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Senator Carranza?
Motion to amend the resolution to include that this will be documented in a spreadsheet.
Sure.
All right, do we have a motion on the table with the amendments for the resolution?
Here.
Senator Patel?
I, a motion to vote by block.
All right, is there a second? All right. So do we have yays? No. Nays? Abstain?
14, including.
Oh. 15. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Our next agenda item is resolution for referendum for club divestment from social responsibility committee. Would you like to speak on the motion?
Yeah.
Good evening. I sit amongst you today with a heavy heart compelled to address the urgent need for solidarity and peaceful protest in the face of unimaginable suffering and injustice. My name is Amina Alaidi, Chair of the Social Responsibility Committee, and I sit amongst my social responsibility members. And it is both a solemn duty and a profound honor to present this resolution, which encapsulates our unwavering commitment to human rights and ethical engagement. Before delving into the specifics of our proposal, I must underscore the harrowing context within which we find ourselves. The atrocities perpetuated by Israel against the Palestinian people demand our attention, our action, and our moral outrage. Since October 7th, 2023, over 33,000 lives, according to UNRWA, which is a UN group, international rights group, have been mercilessly taken in Israel's military operation in Gaza. That's another 1,000 lives taken since the presentation of the last resolution. Within a staggering 70% of those lost being innocent women and children. Additionally, in the West Bank, at least 440 Palestinians, including 110 children, have fallen victim to this relentless violence, marking 2023 as the deadliest year for the Palestinians in 2 decades. Furthermore, Israel's deliberate obstruction of humanitarian aid to Gaza has plunged the region into a state of despair. With its healthcare system on the brink of collapse, widespread famine gripping the population, and a dire shortage of necessities such as food and hygiene products. The gravity of the situation cannot be overstated, and it demands a swift and unequivocal response from the international community. The voices of conscience within the United Nations have spoken loud and clear. Craig Mohammed, the UN Director of the New York Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, resigned from his position, urging an immediate ceasefire and imploring the international community to stand against the ethnic cleansing unfolding before our eyes. Likewise, Secretary General Antonio Guterres has echoed that call for an immediate cessation of hostilities in Gaza, coupled with the unconditional release of all hostages. During the 10th emergency session of the UN General Assembly, a majority of countries rallied behind a ceasefire resolution, underscoring the global consensus on the urgent need for peace and justice in the region. Moreover, the ICJ has taken decisive action, issuing provisional measures in response to South Africa's case against Israel, citing plausible allegations of genocide and grave violations of the Genocide Convention. In the face of such unspeakable suffering and flagrant disregard for international law, we cannot afford to remain silent or passive bystanders. Our resolution today is a testament to our shared values of justice, compassion, and solidarity. It reaffirms our commitment to the principles of ethical spending and human rights advocacy. Central to this resolution is the call for peaceful, nonviolent protests and divestment from corporations complicit in the violation of Palestinian rights, as outlined in the BDS movement. Which I want to add a point of information. The BDS movement has been villainized and made out to be an anti-Semitic group. However, we need to remind ourselves what it's grounded in, which is a nonviolent, peaceful protest. And I urge you all to do your own research on that to make sure that you know what you signed off on and you're proud of it. By adopting these measures, we send a clear message to Israel and the world that we will not tolerate such egregious violations of human dignity and international law. Furthermore, we would like to recenter the Senate and all those in attendance of our objective within this collection of resolutions. I stand amongst you today. Sorry. Looking at future leaders of our world. Sorry, who will enact policies and legislation that will bring justice, freedom, and dignity to their constituents. That being said, it is expected of you to reject the normalization of an apartheid system that has lasted for over 75 years, a genocide that has killed more children within the span of 6 months than all other world wars combined within the last 4 years, and the utter obliteration of the Gaza Strip. It would be absolutely, I don't know how to say the word, but I wrote it, antithetical to those principles to not only fail to recognize these truths, but to write and pass legislation that would impede any movements towards acknowledging basic human rights, to silence and criminalize individuals who seek to make positive change at such a critical moment in this history that we're writing together. I urge each of you to consider the profound moral imperative before us. Let us stand on the right side of history. Let us be voices of conscience in a world plagued by injustice. Today, together, we can make a difference and we can uphold the fundamental rights of all individuals, regardless of their nationality or creed. Thank you.
Sorry for clarification, in your speech, the referendum that you're proposing, can you please outline specifically the procedures and specifically
Oh, do you
what?
want to read it?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay, okay.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry, okay,
It was long.
so just go through these that are
Your
on there.
proposal and your implementation, please. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So, yeah, the proposal is essentially just to help with, our first kind of, in the collection of BDS, resolutions that we're trying to pass as an SRC. Essentially, the first BDS resolution was to make sure that student government funding was under BDS guidelines. And that the next step is to look towards the clubs and, the Board of Budgets, Bob, I don't even know the official name, but that they and Bob and SRC would work together to, hopefully eventually, help the clubs to adopt BDS guidelines. So because we cannot speak on behalf of the clubs themselves and what they want, we wanted to present it as a referendum. Clubs and club leaders, to vote on whether or not they think that this is something that they would want to be a part of. And if the majority vote is with yes, then that would be the official position of Bob and SRC. Well, it would be Bob that allocates the money to the clubs that they give money to. And this is not, playing to the clubs that aren't funded by Bob money, so, yeah.
Senator Carranza?
Point of information, something like this does require people and clubs that are not political in any way, shape or form to have to disclose their personal political views. This is a very pressing issue right now. It's a hot topic on campus. We have a lot of people that are vocal about their perspectives, but we also have a lot of people that are not. There is one voice that tends to be a bit louder on campus, and it can cause social pressures for people to have to stay silent about their personal perspectives. So now we're asking to go beyond and go into recreational clubs where there might be people with several different political ideologies coming together over a completely unrelated topic, and this can potentially interfere with the integrity of those things. I'm president of Fiber Arts at Drew. I personally know people that are in SJP that are in Fiber Arts, and I also know people that are not particularly in agreement with what's been stated here and the facts that have been provided. And I think by introducing that into a recreational space where people are able to bond outside of politics, which for a lot of people, unfortunately, their reality is have to address this on a daily basis. We're now interfering in spaces that were safe, that were meant for fun and recreation, and taking away people's right to privacy.
So Senator Frazier's first, and then I will go online.
Regardless of personal feelings, just looking at the Constitution and bylaws, under the bylaws, Article 1, Section 2, subsection B says the Senate does not have the power to amend the Budget and Organizations Board section of these bylaws without prior approval of the board or the CFO. So, and then the Constitution says in Article 6, B1, I think that's 6. Section A says a referendum shall be placed on the ballot through a 2/3 vote of the Senate or upon presentation to the Attorney General of a petition signed by at least 10% of the electorate concerned. So has either one of those, so as the Senate, we can't change the Bob thing, so we can't bring this referendum. And so has there been the 10% of the electoral, which would be 10% of the student body?
The electoral is Senate.
The electorate is the student body.
People who do the election.
Senator Dean, would you like to?
Point of inquiry, what is the student electorate? Is it Senate or is it student body? There seems to be
Senator
some,
Franklin?
what do you want?
Electorate is defined as all the people in a country or area who are entitled to vote in an election. So that would be the student body.
The entire student body, so 10% of the student body.
Senator Coven?
Yeah, so for the first, you read it out. What's your name?
Amina?
And do you come alone or are you representing?
No, I have my two members here, Dylan and B.
So you guys wrote this resolution. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the second resolution you came with the student government related to like the Palestine Israel issue. And what exactly would you want from the student governments related to this issue? Because this is, I feel it's a bit more extreme than last time, and I just want to know where it would be headed for you guys.
So it's actually like, essentially, what we're asking for here is for you guys to vote on whether or not you are down with having clubs vote on this. And that kind of, I'm gonna go back to Senator Fraser's question, which was talking about the 10%. Once you guys say like, yes, we're down with it, then we, with the Bob's approval and everything, we would have this question posed to club leaders, and that 10% of those people need to vote, the club leaders or clubs. And then within that has to be 2/3 of that 10%. So it's actually the same exact resolution that you guys asked, that we had you guys pass last time, the same guidelines that you guys passed last time. But instead of it just being student gov that votes on it, now we're asking clubs, like, hey, now it's, you guys did it, now it's your turn, like, we're expanding.
We opened it to the student body.
Yeah.
And on the bottom, it says the voting options. Why did you add those specifically?
So when we pose it to the clubs, it's gonna come up as a vote. So if they want to vote in favor, that's the option. If they wanna vote against adopting BDS guidelines, then that's the against, and then they can also say that they don't want to do it. Yeah,
Could it perhaps be, the verbiage is a bit.
we can change it.
Harsh, I feel, so maybe.
Yeah.
Senator Patel.
So I have two things. So if this resolution were supposed to go through, we should. Are you using the same exact resolution? Oh, okay, so I was just like, have the list there too, that was just my thing. And so this might be a conflict of interest. So because I'm the president of SASA now, and sometimes I feel like we order from places, because it's a cultural club, so I feel like we order from places, like from all over, so it might impact this resolution.
Looking for, right?
I wanted to ask, if we were to pass this resolution with, a 2/3 vote, and then I would go on to the student body, et cetera, with the referendum process and, student elections process, if this is going to club leaders, is it just up to the president to vote on it, or is it up to everyone who's in that club? Some clubs, like on fun, they have like 80 people. So like, would it be up to the club as a whole club, or is it just up to the club leadership?
I think that the way I was going to approach it, but I'm definitely open to hearing opinions, because I know I'm sure a lot of you have been in clubs. This was to, hopefully this is a collaborative effort once we actually figure out the actual like verbiage and how everything's presented on the actual question when it's presented. But what I was thinking is like the board would help decide on that, but it's also depends on club dynamics. So, some clubs run with a traditional board, and some clubs, like their entire general membership is a part of the working process for creating events and things like that. So I think that's gonna be something that we'll have to work out exactly like how, but it's what I envisioned it as is the board would vote on it together.
Senator Azine, and then.
I would like to note the courage that was taken by the speaker forward, but I think that certain parts of it should be revised, rewritten. Maybe we should revisit the concept a little bit in the act, like the way we go about doing it. Because I think if we're going to vote on something, it should be in its full form. Otherwise, it could be repealed. We don't want that. So I would like to note the presence of the people who support this and the greater.
So do you propose an amendment to the resolution?
Yes,
Specifically what?
the rewording of it. Like in a more civil sense.
Senator Rubio, and then proceeding.
To be more precise, I would say like rewording of, like rewording voting options just a little bit, and, to add that amendment.
Senator Fritsch.
Point of inquiry, I'm not 100% sure I'm clear on what we're doing, so when we give these voting options to clubs, are we, when they ask Bob for money, are we asking them to just show their support one way or the other, and then giving them money either way? Or are we gonna deny them money based on their thought? I'm a little unclear on that, if you could clarify.
So kind of how I envisioned it was, I don't think it's correct for Bob and whoever is allocating their money to be like, we're accepting BDS guidelines, and we didn't ask any of the clubs about what they think about it, and it just like relies on what the majority opinion is. So what this does is kind of ask the clubs, like, are you guys down with Bob adopting the BDS guidelines? And then the majority says, yeah, we're down with it, then Bob accepts those guidelines, and that's how, going forward, Bob kind of makes that, when they do the allocating of money process, they just make sure that this is something that clubs are confident of, that they know not to.
Any response?
Okay, yes, just based on that, now I have a good sense of what is intended with this. With the last one, I believe it was specific to student government spending and not Bob spending. So that last one had no effect on the clubs at all. And now this one is really just giving the clubs the chance to really just give themselves the name that they are supporting this. Because if they don't, it's just not okay for us to use someone's political stance to deny them money. And we're not gonna do that anyway. So I'm wondering, what is the reason for having them like need to vote? Because the last one wasn't relating to them anyway. The last one was only student government funds for student government events that we passed on. We weren't voting for any clubs because we couldn't speak for them, obviously, there.
I think it's just to assess where the majority opinion lies, and yeah.
Senator Frazier? I mean, yeah.
I would, since we've like been talking about how we have to work things out, I would like to make a motion to table this while we work things out with how exactly this is gonna work.
Seconded by Franza. Is there a vote for yeas to table this motion?
No, nays.
One, two. Abstain.
They raised their hand to abstain.
Okay. How many yeas were there? There were 10.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused about, there was a lot of people saying that they didn't like the wording. I just really want you to be really specific about the wording so that we can make this as best as possible and, word it in a way that is sufficient for everyone, that they can actually agree with it, and we can try to move forward in this process. Really try to talk about certain parts of it that you want reworded and say what you want exactly. So, yeah.
Senator Coven and then Senator Rubio Madera.
Start out with the last part about the voting. You know, there doesn't have to be an explanation on what yes, no, or abstain means. It should be yes, no, or abstain.
And then Rubio Madera.
I would say the same thing, instead of saying like, our club supports the investment from companies complicit in human rights abuses against Palestinians. I would be kind of like, instead of wording it that way, I would say like, our club, supports the use of BDS guidelines and the BOB funding.
Senator Franza.
Instead of having it be a vote where the majority determines what happens for everybody, perhaps instead you can give it as an option for clubs to opt in. Just because usually there's maybe anywhere from 2 to 5 board members and sometimes up to 60 to 70 club members. My club has 35 people in it. They have differing views on this particular thing. I would not feel qualified to make that decision for people and where the money goes. So perhaps make it be an opt-in per club rather than trying to make Bob decide together.
Thank you. And then, sorry, Senator Franklin.
Yeah, I wanna hear other people's opinions on this, but I think the point about it being just board members voting on this is a valid point. So I think if you were to include in something set out to the board members, offering them to then send it out to their club and see how they feel. But again, like, if you're going based off of a majority and it's 51-49, like, it's going to be something that is going to be controversial. And that's the same thing with this, like, if you were to keep this as it is And again, 51% of clubs vote yes, 49 say no. And everybody then from there on needs to adhere to those guidelines. Like, I think. Like, I'm just pointing that I think it's going to be a point of conflict, essentially.
I just have one, yes, so that's where the referendum, like, policy comes in, and it's that 10% have to vote, and then once 10% have votes, it has to be 2/3.
Okay.
That vote yes, and once 2/3 says yes, then that's the official position adopted by Bob.
Senator Pro Tem Gordon.
So this is very controversial in itself. I know, like everyone's been saying, everyone has their own stance on this. I have my views. Everybody else in this room has their own views. Some people might agree with me, some people might disagree with me. And I know that we're talking about this in the stance of the current issue, which is Israel and Palestine, but this country, this world is a lot goes on. It could be other movements that we would want to bring BDS back up again in the future for different. So instead of just saying it specifically in the stance of Israel and Palestine, how about we just say BDS in general for things that might occur in the future? So then this resolution, same type of resolution is brought up in the future over and over again for different types of things. So just boycott, divestment, and what's the S?
Sanctions.
And sanctions. It could just be in general.
Roxy?
I think, Senator Wright has a point. I think the wording does need to be more, I don't know, gussied up or like passable.
Okay, thank you. Roxy, Roxy.
I second, Senator Wright's, offer. I overhear that a lot of these BDS movements are only for Palestine. However, there's a lot of other situations going on like Sudan and, Yemen. And there's a lot of, companies that cater to what's going on in those situations. So I actually agree with that, opinion, and it'll actually solve the problem that we've been passing around about the wording. So if anything, I agree on that. Thank you.
No,
So due to the timing of the Senate meeting, can you please
we move on to the next. Yes, this was gonna be my, yes, all right. So let's move on to section C, Senator Carranza Resolution 1.
And just like clarification, would you like me to read it in its entirety, or do we?
It is completely up to you how you would like to present this resolution.
And the student body has access to this agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, where can they find that?
You can find it on the Google Docs, or like if they look for it, they should be able to find it.
If everyone wants to check, they're shared with me if anyone wants to follow along for the specifics, just because it's a bit of a longer resolution. So this resolution was really born from what happened at the last meeting. Some of the senators and I felt like there was certain information that was really pertinent and needed for us to be informed of in order to vote. Because we're just talking about something, and it's really been what we're talking about this entire time. Right now, like we've said, it's specifically the issue with Palestine and Israel. However, there are other events that will happen. There are other things in the world that will take place. And I think it's important for us to have a procedure to follow when these things arise, just because the reality is the opinions of the people in this room is not the only thing that matters. We're here to represent our constituency, not our personal opinions. And because of that, I think it's important for the student body on specific matters of pressing issues, especially concerning international affairs or any calls to, boycott or divest or sanction, not just BDS in general, but just any sort of ramifications and public statements that we're making towards companies and corporations. I think it's important that the student body have a longer time period. I would like to address the point that the president made in her address. I did submit it a little earlier than that. I guess it wasn't made public until then. It was around 8. Yes, it was within the 24-hour time period. So if you don't feel it's appropriate to vote on that tonight, that's perfectly fine. I was collaborating with people. I got it in as early as possible, so I'm not putting pressure on you to have to make a decision tonight. I just wanted this to be presented now, and perhaps it'll be picked up at the next meeting if that's what is felt to be necessary. But essentially, I'm just acknowledging that the legislation we endorse holds significance for the student. The student government is the collective voice of the student body. People can disagree with that statement, but we are making choices for the student body, and when things come out about decisions that the Drew student government makes, it can reflect on the entire student body. So I wanted to also say that the CLA student government in the whereas is they acknowledge that their position on political matters, especially those related to foreign affairs or resolutions necessitating statements to be made against companies and corporations are publicly reported. This agenda is public record. Everyone here has access to send this out to whomever they'd like outside of the campus. Copies can be made. People that are upset will do things with this information. Unfortunately, I've already heard threats of that, and that alarmed me because I had my name on something that I learned I didn't actually fully support. So my question or my proposal is that the CLA student government should mandate a minimum 7-day window for consideration for resolutions requesting the student government to take a stance on international affairs or make statements against companies or corporations. This necessitates that such resolutions be submitted in PDF format with unrestricted access to the Drew student staff, faculty, and administrators at least 7 days prior to the meeting at which they are discussed. The resolution is to be prominently advertised on Instagram and made available for students, staff, faculty, and administrators to download for reading from the CLA student government packet. This window of consideration is not required to organize non-political vigils following recent tragic events. All resolutions regarding international affairs must be presented fully and transparently without withholding necessary information or limiting access to information. In the event of a breach of procedure or lack of complete transparency in the presentation of a resolution, said resolution shall be suspended until it can be reintroduced openly and honestly. After the presentation of a resolution, any member of the student body may raise a concern regarding the transparency of the presentation or procedural errors within 3 days following that meeting, and the following procedure would take place to address such concerns. Essentially, the Senate would vote, and if there's 1/3 of the Senate that finds there to be incomplete information provided, a lack of transparency or procedural error, then we would be able to suspend that suspend that resolution and provide a procedure for how people can improve the presentation or the resolution itself. And that would have to be sent with giving the party, essentially, it says 72 hours here, but that would also allow for 7 days in advance for people to have 7 days to correct it before they can present it at the next meeting. The revised resolution of presentation should be reconsidered at the next scheduled Senate meeting. So it's not something that's just gonna go under the table. It'll be presented at the next one. And if the presenting party fails to address the identified concerns within a reasonable time frame or refuses to make necessary revisions, the resolutions will be considered withdrawn. And also that the CLA student government will commit to carefully examining its constitution and bylaws in order to ensure that future administrations have a clear procedure outlining how to deal with resolutions of such sensitive nature.
Sorry, so proxies and voters.
Point of inquiry, is 7 days really enough? Or should it be longer, realistically?
I'd like to hear from everybody else. I thought 7
It
days
doesn't
could even
seem
be
like a lot.
pushing it just because we have a limited amount of student government meetings and I'm sure people want to take the time to consider that, but if that's something that is reflected widely that you'd like more time, I mean, I'm happy to make an amendment to this resolution.
Senator Paul.
Personally, I think 7 days would be perfect because we also have responsibilities outside of school, outside of city government, and we have meetings every other week, so I feel like a week in between gives us enough. Well, so I agree with you that 7 days is good. Senator,
Are you, is this for just international affairs or is it for all resolutions?
No, this is specifically, and I've outlined it here, this is for resolutions related to foreign affairs or resolutions necessitating statements to be made against companies and corporations, just because those could have a big impact on the student body. Like, I think we had a resolution to put ice buckets at the C-store. I didn't think that was a pressing enough issue to require 7 days of consideration, so I didn't want to make that applicable for everything.
Sorry, would you like to respond?
I had another thing too. Well, I thought the opposite of Senator Blanco. Maybe like reduce the time frame a little bit, not, 7 days, I think it's all right, but maybe reduce it a little bit. That's just my opinion.
Just for clarification, for everyone on the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, we're looking to implement tabling to be more necessitated. And we're looking to hopefully table, if possible, every 2 weeks without mandating everyone be there every 2 weeks, just they have to be there once a month, but It would be on the off week, so that would mean that when we were tabling, we'd actually get to let people know, hey, there's a resolution in order at the meeting next week. So that was the idea of the timeframe, but thank you.
Item 4, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Senator Carranza was saying. Yes, the work of the Constitution and Bylaws Revision Committee would be assessing this resolution as a whole, and then it would become what would be the new sections of the Constitution and Bylaws that will be voted on by the student body in the next academic year. And then also to add,
Wait, can I ask for clarification? Because when I actually checked the Constitution, it said amendments could be presented and voted on at a meeting. It didn't have to be.
no, I'm saying, I know that, but this would
Oh,
also have
this
to
is-
be
To be
in the
in
future,
the future
yeah.
Constitution, okay.
And then also, when you were speaking on your last point, what part of the Constitution and bylaws did you get that, part from?
It's section 6 of the bylaws, but it is. It is, which one? Sorry, any and all amendments to the bylaws, constitution, and election statutes must be approved by 2/3 of the full Senate. When approved, amendments become effective immediately.
No, not that. That, quoting something about that was.
I was just asked, I have be it resolved that just that as the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, or the student government would commit to carefully examining their constitution and bylaws to make sure that future administrations knew how to handle situations. So basically just considering it in the bylaws.
Thank you. Senator Gordon, Alexis Lawson.
I'd just like to say that I disagree with, the extension of 7 days. I think 7 days is enough. I'd also like to say, I encourage everybody here that has actual role and position in this to think before you choose, before you start regretting things and feeling the pressure. You know what you're agreeing to, feel the pressure, and if you know the context to it and who you're helping, that's it.
Senator Rich.
Yes, I absolutely agree with Senator Cornell's proxy. Having extra time would be great in allowing all the senators to really understand what they're voting on. Because the last thing we want is people voting on things they don't fully understand. That's not the point of these resolutions anyway, especially things very important like this. The student body raises them because they care very deeply about these subjects. And as senators, it's our job to make sure we are well versed in the resolution and what's happening. So to only have 24 hours notice for a meeting, something as important as this, considering we are students first, we are student government, not government students. So we have to make sure that we are in class, and there's a very good chance that a Tuesday and Wednesday, you have multiple classes and other things going on, so it's not enough time for you to really do the necessary research to make an informed vote on the subject where you are representing not yourself, but your entire constituency.
Sorry, Hi, okay, so I am speaking on behalf of SRC. I'm using this opportunity to speak on behalf of SRC. And I would just like to make a few comments. Firstly, I would like to make the comment that I believe that not only this resolution, but following resolution that may be presented is discriminatory towards SRC and our mission. I believe that we presented something last meeting that everyone had agreed on. It was unanimous, and there were no sort of hesitations towards what we wanted to do. And there's actually something that was more controversial than what we had put forward. There were no complaints. There was nothing that people had issues with at that moment up until afterwards. But with this resolution, in regards to the minimum of 7 days, I feel like that is also an issue in regards to the fact that we had submitted resolutions within less than 7 days. And that was something that was taken note on from last resolution. And now that we have taken we have decided to submit a resolution within less than 7 days. Now all of a sudden that's an issue as opposed to previous years where this has never been an issue. It's never been something that you've had to look forward, look into up until when SRC presented. Additionally, there's another part of the resolution that talks about a 1/3 vote, which is actually a minority vote within the Senate. This is particularly concerning because of the fact that because of the minority vote, that would mean that there's about 5 senators that would need to vote in order for something to be considered, something that is, not following rules or regulations, of the student government. That is particularly concerning because, if I want to make sort of an analogy, this isn't sort of a security council where there's permanent members and you're trying to vote or make a veto towards something that you believe only 5 members, which is a minority, not a majority, of the student government, to make a decision about something that's happening. I feel like that's concerning, and I want to put forward that there should be some sort of amendment towards not only that, but also the fact that there's a 7-day, maximum.
Point of information for everyone in the room, on behalf of the senator. I believe it's purely meant to be procedural for future events, and I just want to emphasize that. However, there are many reservations, and those are where you're gonna voice them. Just want to make sure that we all understand that.
I'd just like to respond, and just a reminder, while there are 16 people, I think, that are senators right now, it's not our opinions that matter, it's the opinions of our constituents that matter, and that's what we're meant to be voting on behalf of. So in that sense, it means the 7-day window gives the student body time to be able to read this and to voice their opinions. And everybody that's here tonight, that's watching, hello, I know you haven't actually said anything yet, but you guys actually are welcome to speak, and if you'd like to raise your hand, you can be called on and your voice can also be heard tonight. So this is more of a protection for the student body, to be able to really have ample time to consider these things. While I may have felt deceived with how things were presented last week, and that's where this kind of came from, I think it just brought attention more to a hole within student government where there isn't enough time in general, really with almost everything, for students to have time to make arrangements to be here. If things are submitted with less than 24 hours, people can't make time to come to the meeting and sit down and talk about things or to communicate with their representation. So this is not meant to be like an attack on the SRO. And I can understand how it could be that way. I just think that we need guidelines for how to address such important things moving forward because those didn't exist in the past.
Thank you. Senator Frazier?
I have 2 things. One is a question and one is a, like, point of inquiry, point of information. I agree with Elizabeth that, this is like more of a procedural, trying to fill in holes where there are, not a personal attack. But also I would like to know who is the senators that are on SRC? Because like the people who are on the committee who aren't on the Senate should also be having a voice through their senators as these things are being discussed.
You wanna know who's on the committee? No one's on the committee. Why is no one on the committee? Because none of you guys wanted to be on that committee. So there's that. The only senator that was on that committee was Senator Woolard, but she's resigned, so she's not, nobody's on that committee to represent the people that were on the committee originally. The time was a conflict of interest, so they had to switch. So that's why that committee is just ran by the committee itself, and they're not giving any student government input per se.
Yeah, so I thought like as part of your job, it was to assign people, and then don't the senators set the meeting time, not anybody else? So how?
No, that's not.
I sent you guys out the form, and the Constitution says that I have to assess and assign within your personal preference. So I'm not gonna put you in the committee that you don't wanna be in, because then you're not gonna do anything for that committee. So I put you in the committees and I assigned you to the liaisons that you said that you wanted to be in, because then you'll actually do work for that committee. So I
Okay.
wouldn't put you in the social responsibility committee if you didn't ask to be in it. And then, it's up to the chair of that committee to work with you guys in arranging a time. They normally have a base time for when the committee's been meeting for however long the committee's been enacted and what works with the people in that committee schedule. But then if that doesn't work for you, you can also talk to them about changing times, et cetera. That's up to you guys' decision, not mine.
Point of information, there's also, every committee does, even though have other people from the student body, every committee is actually open to the student body, as you probably know.
Yes,
All right,
but wait, I did have a response to that.
okay, I'm going to ask everyone, if you have already spoken more than 3 times on the floor and you're not going to move the resolution, like, for the sake of time, there's a lot of hands going around the room, and I know everyone wants their input, but if you've already spoken more than 3 times, please refrain. Thank you. Senator Prince.
Right, so I just wanted to agree with what SRJC was saying. Point of inquiry, I just wanted to say that I do agree that the part 2A, when they were talking about the 1/3 vote, I think that we should mirror majority vote, like 2/3 vote, mirror what we already do in Senate, just because we are representing student body, and it's important that majority of us agree with what's being said, also majority of students.
Thank you. Tia, you have a question?
Hi, so I think as, mental justice committee chair, and I would just like to realign this government, to like focus on the racial justice aspect of this. And so like, I feel like the wanting to kind of, elongate this whole process and having an extension of more than 7 days, is not good, because at this point, this is about racial justice, and if you don't know the facts, then look at the other committees, clubs, ask help. Don't just like, put yourself in a bubble, like, this is a college, we're allowed to discourse, and this is how you discriminate. And so like 7 days, this is important enough to want to put this and prioritize this. And so I'm just saying, like, don't distance because it's political, because this is about racial justice, on a resolution that we've done.
Another guest had a question or comments?
So is this just talking about international affairs?
Yes, this is on issues that pertain to international affairs and making statements as a student body against companies and corporations.
Okay, so then it kind of is targeted because it's in direct response to the Israel and Palestine conflict. Because in the written document, all politics related statements need a 7-day window. So it kind of is targeted.
I understand. I brought up the ice bucket thing. Most of our resolutions are kind of within that same sense of an ice bucket or this here and this there. I do agree that it's such an important issue that more of the student body should have been aware of it and been able to voice their opinions. And it's not about extending the period beyond 7 days. It's making a minimum window of 7 days. So 7 days is just. I hear that the 1/3 vote is concerning. Is there a number that's better? That's a simple majority? Because my concern with 2/3 vote is that there are a lot of similar opinions within student government. And as you probably know, there's not a lot more people running. So it's gonna look fairly similar, I believe, to what it looks like right now. With somehow half of us, I think, coming, staying and some more people coming in. So this is a few people feel that there is a concern and a reason to relook at something that should be important. I know we talk about a majority vote, but we're supposed to represent our constituency. And when we're saying a majority vote of the opinions in the room, that's kind of not addressing the concerns of the rest of the student body and people that can't be there.
Other guests, and then after that, I'm going to ask if you are, again, just the table, and if there's a motion, thank you, just for the sake of time, thank you. So
Omar, I'm representing SJT and NSA, and I wanted to add on Tia's comment about how 7 days is way too long. Some of the senators were saying how you have other things to do, but if you need 7 days to look at this, why are you a senator? Why aren't you advertising what you're doing? It's kind of concerning for a student body to hear that the senators aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And on top of that, I want everyone to look at that screen and look at the bottom right and see what the date is. You wait a week, it's what, the 17th? You wait another week, it's finals week. You can't wait any longer. Thank you.
It's not for the senators, it's for the student body because we're meant to represent the senators and we need time to speak to our constituents and hear about their opinions. Because at the end of the day, if all we're doing is coming in with our personal opinions on voting for that, none of the rest of your voices in here are being heard. So it's for the student body and not for the senators because we do read the agenda before we come to meetings.
Okay, thank you. Next guest.
If the concern was really about procedure and having student bodies concern heard, it wouldn't specifically and illicitly say stands on international affairs or make statements against companies or corporations. As a member of RJC, the BIPOC Mentoring Club, and SASA, it feels like a direct attack on the efforts by SJP and SRC to push forward this as representatives of the student body as well, and as people that have illicit protests too. If you're gonna pass resolutions, and as what was just said too, your job is to be our senators and also to represent the student body. It's not even about personal opinion. And distancing yourself, saying it's politics and personal opinion, takes away from the racial aspect of it and the humanitarian aspect of it. So we plead you to actually give a concern about the group and what you want to represent going forward as a student body.
You guys to take out the foreign affairs and, corporate part of it. I just didn't think that the rest of the senators here would feel like they needed that much time to bring up things like putting an ice bucket in the C-store. But if that's what you guys want, does anyone have a suggestion for an amendment at this time?
Thank you. Is there a suggestion for amendment on the table, Senator Frazier?
I would like to make an amendment for it to be all motion, all resolutions and motions for 7 days.
Okay, does anyone want to speak to that? Next, all right, Senator Rubio?
Wouldn't it just like make the process slower of like this resolutions? Like, what would be our job as senators if we can like, it only takes like so much time to do these type of things. We're meant to represent the student body. And we know what the student body wants. They have demonstrated it. And if we don't have the tools to actually provide what they want, what is our job as senators? Like, this is just a target to like slow down the process of these things, to like these resolutions.
Ask you to please refrain. I know that you are emotional. Please refrain from clapping, and just for conciseness, we do have to be done by 9:30. Thank you. Senator Clinton.
Motion to table this resolution.
Second. Okay, is there a vote on the table?
Yeah.
Yeas. Yeas. Nays. Abstain.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying about how that we represent the entire student body, of that, we're kind of unproportional because not everyone in the student body is fully represented in this group. But at the same time, it's not our fault because students don't vote, that's one, students aren't running, that's two. And just the whole electoral process is not up to student government. We do our best to make sure that everyone is voting or that we get enough people to even run. Like, I bet you Election Sherbach can attest to that, that this election season has been hard. 2 days ago, we only had 3 people running for Senate. And now that number has skyrocketed, but it's not our fault. It's if the student body really has these big ideas and has so many issues with what we're doing, they need to attest to that by coming to meetings and running themselves and making sure that when it comes election day, that they're voting to be properly represented.
We're gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is resolution 2. Senator Carranza.
So this one is the one that is a direct response to the BBS resolution that was passed. This is a long one. I personally, myself, and I was supported by Senator Frazier, Senator Frisch, and Senator Coven in some procedural things that were missing. The first thing that I'd like to bring up is that the resolution document was locked. I myself did not access the document, nor could Jean Brisson, until the meeting had already started. In fact, actually, when the background information was initially submitted in the resolution, it was later updated to be a separate document that was still locked, and it's still locked. I can still not view that information. A printed copy of the resolution was provided to everybody in this room and was missing the background information. That was just shown as a background, as an external link that, again, I was not able to access, which is the bigger issue, is not that I couldn't access, but that would mean if there's restricted access, that the entire student body was unable to review and see this resolution. There was also, the resolution was submitted less than 24 hours before the meeting. Normally, I would say this isn't necessarily an issue, but because of the subject matter of this, I believe it was very important for people to have a little bit more time to consider, which is why I found out afterwards hearing a lot of different opinions from people that I didn't even think necessarily had opinions, because they hadn't been really vocalized before, that this was something that really upset a lot of people. This is something I've heard a lot of debate on, and something that I knew people would have been present to discuss had there been more time for that meeting. So I just want to clarify that didn't break any procedural thing that we had. We have a very unofficial deadline for when things are submitted to the agenda. But just in terms of having access for the student body, I found that to be an issue. The one biggest thing that I'd like to emphasize here, which is truly the biggest issue, was that I specifically asked at the meeting if that resolution were to be passed, was student government taking a stance for Israel, for Palestine or against Israel? And I was told, no, we're not taking a stance. And when I asked that, I asked about a statement. We were not making a statement. And a statement was later made with the collaboration of the SRC, which is the Social Responsibilities Committee, which is a part of the student government, and the student government stating information which was not agreed to and be it resolved to. So as a student government, we took a stance on this very important and pressing issue, and made a statement on behalf of the entire student body. And because I specifically asked that, I did ask the senators in our internal chat to review this and to take that down, just because it went against the direct dialogue of the meeting, which unfortunately the minutes are not complete nor are they accurate. So I cannot reference my own minutes, but I do have an email, which is an Appendix A that can be reviewed, which is from VP Merks, who is the vice president of the school, who was present at that meeting, that can confirm that that went directly against the dialogue of the meeting. I did want to talk about how there was no disclosure of the potential ramifications for this, as President Satola had said before and made claims that this was inaccurate. Ultimately, it's her opinion. That's how she felt about it, which is perfectly fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I encourage everyone here to formulate your own opinion, research your own facts, take your own stance on the issues. But I do want to say there was an extensive list of companies that were not included, such as Google and Amazon, which are in the bigger BDS list, which I think people should be aware of, especially because places like Amazon are huge places of employment. Google is a big place that people like to want to work at, and I just want to make sure people understand that this was on the list. In the be it resolved, I'm asking that there was an acknowledgement of the lack of transparency and procedural errors in the submission of this particular resolution. I do want to say that the CLA student government should commit to conducting a thorough review of that particular resolution and provide a resolution feedback and improvement plan, which was outlined in my last resolution, basically to present to the party that presented it, in order to basically ask for clarification not ask for clarification, but ask them to clarify how they present it, like including the background information within the same document, having this be accessible ahead of time, and also possibly presenting part of the counter argument. Since it is a Social Responsibilities Committee presenting this, it's not Students for Justice in Palestine. I think that's important to acknowledge too, that doesn't mean that the Student Responsibility Committee necessarily has a right to take a very hard stance on these issues, as anyone can join. And I myself might find myself joining as well to provide a different perspective. Part of this whole thing, and I actually have I have Senator Frazier and Senator Fritsch looking to rescind our vote because it was unanimous. Student government is meant to represent the student body. Had I had more of this information and been further informed, I would have not voted to pass. And I have 3 people here that can agree. 2 people and myself that can agree on this. And specifically, what I want to ask you is to see if you're encouraging the diversity of thought on this campus. Everyone here is entitled to an opinion. Everyone here is entitled to share their opinion. And when you start encroaching on other people's rights to voice their opinion, and you start demonizing opinions widespread on this campus, it creates an unsafe environment for several students. And while we constantly talk about the majority, and we do use a majority vote, that does not take away the importance of the feelings of the minority. And we need to consider those as senators in this room specifically. We need to make sure that we are representing our constituency and not our personal interests, because there are people that I have seen at different events that have denied affiliations with certain things. There are people that are pushing personal agendas, as I've found in discussions outside of here. And I think it's really important for us all to take a reevaluation. I completely admit fault. I was the person to motion to vote on that resolution. I did not have the right to do that. I felt that it was simply asking us not to buy from a specific list of things. And wow, that's such a simple thing to do. I had no idea the potential ramifications of that. how many people that could hurt, and that we were taking such a strong stance as a student body, and I definitely did not agree to, which is why I brought up the point that we were making a statement. So I'm asking that we suspend this resolution in the meantime, and evaluate as student government what needs to be fixed in the next representation of that, and that it can become eligible for voting again.
Thank you. Pro Tempore Wright.
Okay, so I just wanted to, tell Senator Carranza something, and this is nothing against you at all, it's just that, as you can see, the Social Responsibility Committee has came in numbers with students expressing their concerns. I feel like, just overall for the Senate vote, if you wanted, you, Senator Frazier and Senator Fridge to have more backing from the student body, I feel like you should have had some of those students come out that felt against this, because most of the people here are for the resolution the resolution that was passed 2 weeks ago, and you guys